There are disasters that arrive with warning, where the ground trembles before an earthquake, the sky darkens before a storm, or a volcano signals its intent before it erupts. But some disasters unfold in a far more unsettling way, emerging without sound, without visible force, and without any immediate sign that something is wrong. On the night of August 21st, 1986, in a remote region of Cameroon, nearly 1,800 people were killed in a matter of minutes, along with thousands of livestock, as an entire valley was overtaken not by fire or flood, but by something completely invisible. What happened at Lake Nyos remains one of the most chilling natural disasters ever recorded, a tragedy that unfolded in near silence and left behind a landscape of sudden and inexplicable death. And by the time anyone realised, it was already too late. In the quiet village of Souboum, Cameroon, Joseph Unquain had just finished another long day of work. After supper with his family and tucking his daughter into bed, he settled in for what he expected to be another peaceful night. But that night, as darkness deepened, Joseph awoke to an absolute nightmare. In a moment, the familiar sounds of home were replaced by an eerie silence and an unimaginable sight. His heart sank as he discovered his own family cold and unmoving in their beds. For a moment it was impossible to process what he was seeing, as though his mind refused to accept that everything familiar and alive just hours earlier was now completely still. Then, as he took in the scene around him, he noticed a strange, bitter smell lingering in the air and ventured outside to investigate. He found his village transformed into a graveyard. Neighbours and relatives lay lifeless, collapsed in place, with absolutely no signs of any struggle, while animals appeared to have simply lain down and died where they stood. An overwhelming sense of dread took hold of him, and in that moment he understood that whatever had happened was not only catastrophic, but still dangerously present. What Joseph was witnessing defied everything we instinctively associate with death, because there were no injuries, no signs of panic, and no evidence of violence, only the quiet and inexplicable absence of life, as though it had been removed all at once. He tried to stand, but within moments his body gave way, collapsing where he stood as the lack of oxygen overwhelmed him, unaware of how close he was to the edge of the gas cloud. He was barely able to breathe. Each breath felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself had changed. Joseph forced himself into action, climbing onto his motorcycle and making his way towards a nearby place called Womb to report what he had witnessed. When he finally managed to speak, his voice trembled as he relayed the horror to the authorities, and within a short time a team of investigators was dispatched on the orders of President Paul Biya. In the early stages, officials struggled to make sense of what had happened, and with no obvious explanation, fears quickly turned towards the possibility of a chemical release, or even a contagious outbreak. Police and medical personnel approached the area with extreme caution, unsure whether they were dealing with something that could spread further. On the following Saturday, Father Ten Horn, the parish priest of Womb, became the first outsider to enter the devastated village of Nyos. As he moved through the area, he described the scene as resembling the aftermath of a neutron bomb, not because of destruction, but because of the eerie absence of life. Some victims appeared to have attempted to flee, their bodies found along paths and open spaces, while others remained exactly where they had been, lying in their beds as though they had simply fallen asleep. There were no signs of struggle, no overturned belongings, and no indication that anyone had understood what was happening in their final moments. Even more unsettling was the complete lack of insects or scavengers, as one rescue worker noted that there were not even flies around the dead animals, something that would normally be unavoidable in such conditions. Adding to the mystery, many of the bodies bore unusual greasy red stains that no one could immediately explain. Amid the devastation, a small number of survivors were found on higher ground above the main villages, many of them in critical condition and in urgent need of medical attention. Some later recalled hearing a low rumble from the direction of the lake, followed by a foul, suffocating odour, after which they lost consciousness without warning. Several described a sudden onset of weakness and disorientation, as though their bodies were shutting down without explanation, leaving them unable to comprehend what was happening before everything went dark. At the same time, the indigenous Bar men living along the upper banks of Lake Nyos remained largely unaffected, and their survival drew attention to long-standing local beliefs. For generations, their oral traditions had warned against settling too close to the lake, describing it as a place associated with unseen forces and potential danger. According to these traditions, the area surrounding Lake Nyos had long been avoided due to fears of vengeful spirits tied to the lake itself. One story told of a deceased chief who had demanded a prized cow as a sacrificial offering, and when his family failed to honour that request properly, the chief's spirit was enraged, cursing the lake and its people. While such accounts were often dismissed as folklore, they had historically influenced settlement patterns, with many choosing to remain on higher ground. However, over time, as new generations moved into the region and the old warnings faded, communities gradually resettled closer to the lake, unaware of the very real danger that lay beneath its calm surface. As the initial shock gave way to investigation, Father Ten Horn assisted in transporting bodies to a local hospital, where doctors quickly reached a crucial conclusion. The victims had not died from disease or poisoning in the conventional sense, but from suffocation, a finding that only deepened the mystery. There were no infectious agents present, no evidence of toxins in the bloodstream, and no visible injuries, leaving investigators with a single troubling question. How could so many people have simultaneously been deprived of oxygen without any clear cause? Just 2 years earlier, in 1984, a similar but smaller disaster at Lake Monoon, less than 100 kilometres away, had killed 37 people under eerily similar circumstances, a warning that went largely unrecognised at the time. It was at this point that scientists from around the world began to focus their attention on Lake Nyos itself, suspecting that the answer might lie beneath its surface. Among them was geologist George Kling from the University of Michigan, whose observations would prove critical in understanding the event. One of the first things he noticed was a dramatic change in the lake's appearance, as waters that had once been a clear blue had taken on a deep reddish colour due to dissolved iron. Further analysis revealed something even more alarming, as the lake was found to contain extraordinarily high concentrations of carbon dioxide, trapped in its deeper layers under immense pressure. At the bottom of the lake, the pressure was so great that vast amounts of gas could remain dissolved and invisible, building silently over time. This discovery led to the identification of an extremely rare phenomenon known as a limnic eruption, sometimes referred to as a lake overturn. In fact, only 3 lakes in the entire world have ever displayed this deadly phenomenon. To understand this, it helps to imagine a sealed carbonated drink, where gas remains dissolved in the liquid under pressure. If that container is disturbed, the gas rapidly escapes, producing an explosive release of bubbles. In a similar way, Lake Nyos had been holding vast amounts of carbon dioxide in its depths, kept stable only by the pressure of the water above. When that stability was disrupted, possibly by a landslide or a minor seismic event, the deep water rose towards the surface, where the pressure was lower. As it did so, the dissolved carbon dioxide rapidly came out of solution, forming a massive cloud of gas that surged upwards and then spilled outwards across the surrounding landscape. Unlike a conventional eruption, there was no explosion in the traditional sense, no flames, and no immediate visual cue of danger. Instead, the gas moved silently and invisibly, spreading across the valley and displacing the oxygen in the air. The surrounding terrain only made it more deadly as the steep crater walls and narrow valleys channeled the gas downward, funneling it directly into villages below with nowhere for it to disperse. Because carbon dioxide is heavier than air, it did not disperse quickly, but instead flowed downward into low-lying areas, effectively filling the valley like an invisible flood. As it spread, it created an environment in which breathing became impossible, leading to rapid unconsciousness and death for both humans and animals caught within its path. On that night, the gas cloud extended across a distance of approximately 12 miles, and within a very short period of time, between 100,000 and 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide were released. The result was catastrophic, with nearly 1,800 people losing their lives, along with more than 3,500 livestock. Many victims were found in positions that suggested they had no awareness of what was happening, reinforcing the conclusion that the gas had acted quickly and without warning. Despite extensive investigation, the exact trigger for the eruption was never definitively identified, although reports of distant rumbling sounds suggest that a small earthquake or similar disturbance may have initiated the event. As researchers continued their work, they discovered that the lake was gradually accumulating carbon dioxide once again, raising the possibility that a similar event could occur in the future. For those who had survived, the idea that the same invisible threat could return was a constant and unsettling reality. In response, engineers developed a system designed to safely release the gas over time, using pipes to bring deep water to the surface in a controlled manner. While this solution has reduced the immediate risk, it requires ongoing maintenance, and concerns remain about what could happen if the system were to fail or to be neglected. In the years that followed, many survivors were displaced from their homes, and although some have expressed a desire to return, rebuilding efforts have been slow, leaving communities in a state of uncertainty. Many had lost not only their homes but entire families in a single night, leaving behind a community shaped as much by grief as by displacement. For Joseph, the silence that night would never truly leave him, a reminder that everything he had known could be taken without warning and without a single sound. At the same time, the disaster prompted significant international research into volcanic lakes and the risks they pose, leading to the formation of scientific groups dedicated to monitoring and understanding these environments. The events at Lake Nyos serve as a powerful reminder that not all natural disasters announce themselves in ways that we can easily recognize. Sometimes the most dangerous threats are those that remain hidden beneath calm and seemingly harmless surfaces, waiting for a single moment of instability to reveal their true nature. And in the end, what made the disaster so devastating was that there was no warning, no sound, no visible threat, just an invisible force that moved through the valley, leaving the air itself unable to sustain life. Now, this was a terrible disaster which just crept up on almost 1,800 people who were just not aware it was coming. Our condolences go out to the families of those who lost their lives, and we hope that people who were affected can re-establish their villages and their communities. Despite the tragedy, I hope that you appreciated the way the information was presented. I'll see you on the next one, and I'll say bye-bye for now.